The last story I did was a tough one. Um, kind of even took a little break afterwards for a little while just to let it process. And I'll tell the rest of that story. But I had a wonderful experience this week, and I want to tell a story of how you know we as parents can impress our children and make a difference in their lives and set them on a path, and how the world kind of becomes an arc when you see it. So I was a pilot, but it started right here in St. Louis, my hometown, where I'm once again living after 38 years of being away. And it started with my dad. My dad was a World War II Marine and loved flying, wanted to be a pilot. But like many of those men in that generation, circumstances never came together for him. But in the Marine Corps, he served as a mechanic on Corsairs. And if you know the World War II, the beautiful World War II Gullwing aircraft. Uh, and so I kind of grew up with this love of flying, and a lot of it comes from that man. And John E.J. Wellman from Boston, uh, Lynn, Massachusetts, the other side of the tracks, as he used to tell me, just always had it. He encouraged that. When he saw that was my dream, he encouraged it. We used to go to the Lambert Field here in St. Louis, and my dad would take me down to the end of back when you could do this, take me down to the end of the gate, and you could sit there, and McDonnell Douglas at the time had their facility right across the airport in St. Louis, and you could see the brand new F-15s. They were rolling off the line, being tested out of Lambert. They would take off, and so we would grab like a drink and the snack, maybe lunch, and we would sit in the chairs at the end of the gates, looking across the runway, watching the F-15s come and go. And then, really significantly, it's funny how the life goes. So when I was about 10, we went to a fair in Tower Grove Park here in St. Louis, and they actually had a Bell Jet Ranger helicopter doing little tours, doing like 15-minute rides. And you hopped in the back, and you paid whatever amount of money it was. I can't imagine it was cheap for a family that was living, at our means, if you will. We weren't rich by any measure. And the funny thing, my dad actually sweet talked the pilot into letting me sit in the front seat, in the front left seat. And that's the first time I sat in the cockpit of anything. And we took off in this Bell Jet Ranger and flew around St. Louis. I just remember being in awe, and especially of helicopters. You're sitting in a park in a field and just take off straight up into the air and fly low over the city and then return to that little spot, the little postage stamp spot. And the funny thing is, years later, I go to West Point. I graduate. I fight hard. It was a struggle, and I think I've told the story before of how my then girlfriend and later wife pushed me to get my grades better so I could become an aviator, become a pilot. Got into aviation. The last slot, based on class rank, I think I was 88 of 90. If I was last male, I was 90 people got picked for it. I was one of the last ones. But I always joke that when the smart guys were studying. Their eyes went bad, mine didn't. And so they couldn't go aviation, and I did. So I end up at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and driving to work one day at Fort Rucker with a good friend of mine, Judd Willard, and we pass the airfield there. There was a tactical unit at Fort Rucker, and at that time they were a TAC Helicopter Battalion. I think they still had Cobras then. It was 1987. I mean, it's a long time ago. And in those days, you had the OH-58, which was the military version of the Bell Jet Ranger, which I'd flown as a child. And I'd never seen it in military livery before. It's got a really low, sits real low on the ground with skids and dark green and just, I don't know, just a sexy little thing. And I'll never forget, I said to Judd, what is that? He goes, that's OH-58. It's a scout helicopter. I said, we've just never been exposed to them, I guess, at that point as a West Pointer. And I was like, oh, okay. He goes, what's that? He goes, oh, it's great that they do all the scouting, they find the targets. He goes, but it's a really interesting fact about that aircraft, Fred. He says, it's a one-pilot aircraft, a single-pilot aircraft, but it's got two seats. Do you know why it's got two seats? I said, no. He goes, well, one seat's for the pilot and one seat's for his balls. And I said, oh, I'm going to fucking fly that. And sure enough, I ended up being a scout pilot. So I ended up flying the aircraft that my dad sweet talked the pilot and let me sit in the front of. And I flew him for many years. So I flew in Desert Storm, and for many years until really Iraq, my OIF when I switched over to Blackhawks. And so I of course I left aviation after that first Iraq tour. General Petraeus recruited me to be a spokesman for him, and I switched over. And I haven't flown since 2004. So I've moved back home to St. Louis, and there's just a ton of helicopters here. A lot of the schools are here. And so I did some research, and sure enough, there's a flight school right across the river in Illinois. And yesterday I actually went out and I booked a flight with an instructor pilot who ended up being an Army infantryman who used his GI Bill after he got out to get his pilot's license and become a helicopter instructor pilot. And is flying doofuses like me around St. Louis teaching us how to fly. So I was just kind of marveling today as I woke up how life goes full circle. That we as parents can have such a long line. My father passed away in 2010. He's buried in Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery south of St. Louis. I visit him often now that I live here. But it's just remarkable to me how often I'll sit back and how I think Dad would be really proud to know that his dream of flying translated to me flying. And then even all these years later, at the ripe old age of 56, I'm back in a cockpit. And I may even go ahead and get my license again, because why not, right? And we're not getting any younger, and I was actually pretty good at it in the day. And so, but that's the lesson, isn't it? I think we as parents need to remember that, you can guide your child. And maybe they won't take that. None of my kids fly, which is great. They're very successful in all their fields. I'm very proud of my children. A couple of them did go in the Army. My son did go in the Army. My son-in-law is in the Army. But we as parents can guide them, and it's easy not to see. Maybe you don't see sometimes the impact you have on your kids, but old Joe Wellman certainly did impact me in a lot of ways, probably beyond what he imagined, I think. And life just goes full circle sometimes. Anyway, a lighter story this week. I'll tell you what, though, next week I will, later this week, I will finish the story of what happened at Fort Campbell after Jennifer passed. It's actually a good story because good people step up, and good people generally will if you let them. So, thanks.